in our shared silence together. Will you join me in prayer? I invite you to feel the presence of all the other people in this virtual room and to consider all of the many stories and connections we share with one another. In spite of our physical disconnection, let us feel our spiritual connections. There are many stories in this room we know, and many more stories of those who aren't with us today, but are part of our community. And so let us keep on breathing into our connectedness, our oneness. Community is messy, imperfect, and yet it also is saving, healing, transforming. As we begin another church year, let us recommit ourselves to our shared purpose, remembering to breathe in and breathe out when we are disappointed or frustrated or hurt along the way. Let us practice forgiveness and beginning again in love. The greatest goodness is possible in our coming together. And so let us keep reaching out, keep drawing in, keep loving and breathing together. We ask these things for ourselves, for those we love, and those we do not love. Blessed be, and amen.
I'm not a stranger to the dark. Hide away, they say, 'cause we don't want your broken parts. I've learned to be ashamed of all my scars. Run away, they say, no one will love you as you are. But won't let them break me down to dust. I know that there's a place for us, for we're glorious. When the sharpest words wanna calm me down, I'm gonna stand a flood, I'm gonna drown them out. I am brave, I am bruised, I am who I'm meant to be. This is me. Look out, here I come. I'm gonna set a floor, I'm gonna drown him out. I am brave, I am bruised, I am who I'm meant to be. This is me. Look out, 'cause here I come. Watching the
Never the words wanna cut me down. I'm gonna drown them out.
Good morning. Well, wow, got to take that in for a second. Whew. Well, it's really great to be with you all here again this morning. And it was wonderful to see some of you in person actually a few weeks ago when I went to your church to help distribute You the Vote kits with Donna. And in moments like this, that kind of safe in-person connection is so precious, and it really lifted my spirits, as did our setting the table ritual this morning. I've never seen something like that in any of the services that I've done across our state this year. And I'm glad that I didn't have to talk right after, because I have to be honest, it choked me up a little bit. And to see your faces and see everybody, set to that backdrop of the beautiful Peter Mayer song was really special. And if that's not holy, I don't know what is. Well, this week, each morning when I've gone outside to drink my cup of coffee, I have felt a distinct difference in the air, that morning chill. Maybe you felt it too. And in this instance, nature is right on time, because Tuesday marks the eternal equinox, the changing of the seasons and the balance between light and dark. And this is a sacred time for many. In pagan mythology, the equinox is called Mabon, or the second harvest. And it's a time to give thanks for summer and to pay tribute to the coming darkness. In Christianity, autumn marks the ending of and the beginning of the liturgical year. And this year, the Jewish high holy days fall in September, today marking the end of Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, and Yom Kippur beginning next Sunday. And many of us may also place significance on this time, connected with these traditions or in other ways. But we can all take this opportunity for reflection and ritual, an opportunity to ask ourselves, how am I really doing right now? And as our hymn this morning describes, return to who we are. Return to the home of our soul. Easier said than done, right? Because although coffee hour conversations are great, this kind of reflection requires us to create enough space and stillness to really be with ourselves. Whether it be through a long walk or a long drive, writing in a journal, a ritual of personal significance, or some other way where we can listen deeply and feel deeply and be attuned to the heart of our lives. In my own practice of trying to do this, I've held close one of the most important pieces of wisdom that I've ever heard during my ministerial training. And it came not from a theologian or a colleague, but from a man who works at the Sara Lee Baking Company. Here's his story. Francois was an immigrant who came to the US from West Africa. He'd recently gotten his master's degree in sociology and arrived in New York City with high hopes of starting a career. So you can imagine how he felt when the only job he could get was doing dishes at a restaurant. He described calling back home and feeling embarrassed. He didn't want to tell his mom that he'd moved halfway across the world to be a dishwasher. But Francois had faith, incredible faith. He knew he had gifts, and he believed that God had a plan for him. And so he stayed positive, and he did his job well, and eventually his boss bumped him up to making desserts. And that is when Francois fell in love with baking. He felt joy and a sense of purpose in feeding people, sending beautiful desserts out of the kitchen and watching the clean plates come back. He loved it, and he was good at it. So much so that in time he got a job, managing his own baking crew at Sara Lee. Finally, in that role, Francois could use his sociology degree to better understand the dynamics of his team and see their talents and just be a great boss. No, it wasn't the path he'd expected, but he was able to find a profound sense of calling in his career. And in a recorded interview about vocation, he offered some advice to others. He said this: "You are the story you tell yourself. So make sure you tell yourself a great story and live that story." Whether we do it consciously or not, we each move through this world with a story. We are meaning makers. That's what we are hardwired to do. And so that story, it shapes our sense of who we are and what we're worth and how we experience this world. So you bet it matters. It matters a great deal what that story is. But how do we become more attuned to the story we are telling ourselves and make sure that it's a great one? In my time thinking about this statement, I've tried to reflect on what actually makes for a great story. And in speaking about our story, I'm not just talking about our past, although that's part of it, but also the story that is unfolding right before us, and how we have a quiet but powerful inner voice narrating our story in each moment. First, a great story lifts up the holiness of our lives, like that Peter Mayer song so beautifully articulates. It lifts up the great blessings of our lives and the times that our own gifts blessed the world, and we felt our sacred worth deep in our bones. And that's what we see in Francois' story. Even in New York City, all alone, with no one there to remind him of his worth, his story anchored him. He knew who he was and what he could offer, and that he was loved. And that's what we're called to do. We cannot go looking for our worth and dignity out in the world, in a culture where we are so often made to feel that we must prove our worth. No. Our job is to make our sacred worth the non-negotiable truth at the center of our story. It has to be strong and resilient, because when it isn't, we open ourselves up to having someone else write our story for us. Tell us what we're worth. And this might be the understatement of the century, but that doesn't always go so well. But here's the thing. When we do have that strong anchoring story, we can have the courage to also face the hard truths about our life and know that our worth is not at stake when we do so. A great story is not only the good stuff. A great story is, above all, a complete and true story of who we are. Yeah, it's tempting to tell a story that leaves out the parts that are hard to look at, that don't fit our idea of who we want to be seen as. But we've got to honestly look at our whole life, including the tender stuff. And here's why. Because when we leave out the painful parts, we know that we're doing it. Somewhere deep in us, we know it. And when we try to bury those things, we do it out of the fear that we will be defined by them. When we bury them, they become seeds. Researcher, storyteller Brene Brown writes, "The irony is that we attempt to disown our difficult stories to appear more whole or more acceptable, but our wholeness actually depends on the integration of all our experiences, including our falls." Especially in these times, in the current moment, in the story that is unfolding before us, we have got to have courage to be attuned to our spirits, to say, I'm scared, I feel alone, to acknowledge when we are in mourning for the loss of people, for the loss of moments. We've got to be honest with ourselves about when our hearts are broken. As we've been talking about this morning already, one loss that feels very raw to so many of us this morning is the loss of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And right now it may feel too devastating to read or watch coverage honoring her life, but in time we need to have the courage to name our pain and our fear and our grief, because there is no other path to healing. In other cases, the virtue of our honesty is that we hold ourselves accountable for our actions. But in all cases, we look at these tender things so that we can live with them, so that we can move through this world from a place of wholeness. Brene Brown also writes this: "True belonging is the spiritual practice of believing in and belonging to yourself so deeply that you can share your most authentic self with the world and find sacredness in both being a part of something and standing alone in the wilderness." Brown's sense of belonging actually comes from the late Dr. Maya Angelou. In an interview, she was once asked whether she belonged anywhere or to anyone. And Dr. Angelou said this: "I belong to myself. I'm very proud of that. I'm very concerned about how I look at Maya. I like Maya very much. I like the humor and the courage very much. And when I find myself acting in a way that doesn't please me, then I have to deal with that." When we have the courage to tell the truth about ourselves, to ourselves, we will experience the peace of belonging to ourselves. Our anthem today, sung by the youth of Uni Prep High School in New York, captures this so beautifully. They sing, "I'm not scared to be seen. I am brave. I am bruised. I am who I'm meant to be." It's so powerful. And in singing that, they are narrating their own great story. One of the reasons that I chose that song for today is that I've actually developed the ritual almost every time I drive somewhere to preach of listening to that song. So when I drive to your congregation, I put it on right when I pull off the highway and I'm waiting at the light at the intersection. Not because I think you're gonna like throw rotten tomatoes at me, that I need to armor up or anything like that. No, it's because the way that song makes me feel, that's how I want to feel. And I believe we are all called to develop rituals and spiritual practices, the soundtrack of our lives, the things that help us narrate our lives from a place of self-worth and self-honesty and power. We are not meant to go looking for belonging in the world. We are meant to know the peace that comes from belonging to ourselves. And from that place, move powerfully and authentically through this world. In this season of reflection, and every day, may we have the courage to write that great, sacred story of our life and live that story. May it be so. Amen. Our closing hymn was recorded this May by members of my home congregation, the First Unitarian Church of Providence, Rhode Island. And now please rise in body or spirit for our closing hymn, number 128, For All That Is Our Life.
Good morning. I'm Fred Jodry. Aren't you excited that it's May? Today we're going to sing hymn 128, For All That Is Our Life. I'll give Arlen a moment to get back to the words so you can join in if you are feeling inspired to sing along.
For all that is our life, we sing our thanks and praise. For all life is a gift which we are called to use to build a common good and make our own days glad. For needs which others serve, for services we give, for work and its reward, for hours of rest and love, we come with thanks and praise. For all that is our life, for sorrow we must bear, for failures, pain and loss, for each new thing we learn, for fearful hours that pass, we come with praise and thanks. For all that is our life, for all that is our life, we sing our thanks and praise. For all life is a gift, for we are called to use to build a common good and make our own days glad.
One of the ways that we live out our mission to create loving community is to contribute financially to the ministries of this congregation and to the good work of our community partners. The Justice Action Team has decided to give our current offering to Greensboro Mutual Aid. Greensboro Mutual Aid helps people who are undocumented and otherwise left out of the stimulus programs. The YMCA is their physical sponsor. If you'd like to make a contribution via PayPal to the church, you can do so in the link in our chat and indicate COVID in the memo line. You can also send a check to the church or donate at our website. Our offering will now be gratefully received. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. As we leave this week's service, we remain connected by bonds of caring and concern. Let us keep our love for one another in our hearts and minds as we go forth into the world. Now let us join our benediction hymn, Shalom Havarim.
You can place your hands over your heart for our benediction hymn number 400. Shalom Havarim. This is a Hebrew song which means peace, dear friends, until we meet again. Shalom Havarim, Shalom Havarim, Shalom, Shalom, Lahitro, Lahitro, Shalom, Shalom. Shalom Havarim, Shalom, Shalom, Lahitro, Lahitro, Shalom, Shalom.
We should have some slides up that give our announcements and list our worship team. You can see the folks there who have been helpful in this morning's service. Do we have announcement slides? Yes, coffee starts after the service. Just stay on this Zoom meeting and we'll go into our coffee hour. And I've been joined by Charlotte, who wants to be in the service. And she talks to me, so you may have heard her a few times. And I have a hard time keeping her out of the room. She fusses if I try to lock her out. Do we have other announcements that go up on the slides? Okay, we're going to have charades night on Saturday the 26th from 6 to 7. There'll be more information on this with a Zoom link. So be prepared to act your heart out. And we're continuing our history of an Indigenous people history of the United States. We've had our first session, and we're going to have 2 more. And this is a very interesting book. I recommend reading it. It's in some ways it's a hard read, but it's a good read to have done to recognize our history, as Lisa says, the bad parts as well as the good parts. That you have to acknowledge the hurt places. Do we have any other announcements? All right. We're going to continue, but we're going to restart Chalice Circles. Chalice Circles are small group ministries, and you'll have a chance to meet different people and be connected to them. And there's a discussion, set of discussion topics. There's a lot of material. There's stuff you can go look on the internet, and there are things you can talk about. And if you're interested in joining a Chalice Circle, we're going to have a tryout session on Sunday at 1:30, so you can see what you'd like to see, what it's like, and see if you'd like to participate. And you can contact Marie or Kay to do that. So now I think we're ready to go to coffee hour. Let's see. Let's close the chat. And people can unmute themselves. Somebody may be able to, yes, the whoever's got the host power can unmute everybody, but you can unmute yourself at this point, and you can turn on your video so you can join us. And Lisa, I just love that song. When it came out of The Greatest Showman, every gay chorus in the country ordered copies of it. It was out of print almost immediately. Nobody, I mean, we had to buy the rights and make our own copies because they could not keep up with the demand on it. Such a wonderful song.
Okay.
And it's wonderful to see in context of The Greatest Showman too.
Mute all.
My favorite video of that song is actually when
Steve made me host.
they were doing it for the first time in tech rehearsal.
I saw that. Oh, it's a wonderful video.
The woman who said it started broke down in tears and eventually came out behind the podium, and it was. I watched that once a week. It really lifts my spirit.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hey, Bishop, we can hear you and Rick.